David. I live in California, and I'm getting into YouTube. I was watching a YouTube program yesterday, and a channel, and one of the questions that they asked a lot of older people was, what would you tell your younger self, if you had a chance? Now, the theme of the whole thing was these people had not saved enough money, had not bought their own home, so they were renting. And it was pretty sad. And I actually think it's going to happen a lot more, just because this is the way of the world now. We tend to get gratification immediately, and then we don't think about the future. We just think it probably is not going to happen. I remember my niece asking me one time when she was very young, "Uncle Dave, how come you work so hard?" And I never had anybody ask me that. I actually didn't think I worked that hard, but I guess I did. I put quite a bit of hours in my sales position selling swimming pools. And so I thought about it for a while. I really had to think about it. And what I came up with was, when I grew up very poor. It was not necessarily because not having money from a poor paying job. It was more because my dad was an alcoholic, and he would pretty much drink his money away. And I remember in 1971, it was a Christmas where I'm going to say I was 13 years old. And you always expect to have a lot of presents, and it's a big deal. So I wanted to show you guys what I got for my Christmas present in 1971. And it was a sad gift, but it's probably turned out to be one of my best gifts. In 1971, this used to be, whenever you have a typewriter, you'd have a typewriter ribbon. And this is the typewriter ribbon. And what's inside of it, it says Christmas 1971. I remember my dad had one of those machines, that you could make these little labels here. And inside here is a coin, a $50, a quarter, a dime, a nickel, and a penny from 1971. This is all I got for Christmas. I didn't get anything else. And what was great about living in a rural area, everybody I knew, including us, we were all poor. I mean, you didn't have to compare like it is nowadays, where you got these neighbors that have a lot, and then some neighbors don't have enough. Where I grew up, nobody had anything. And I've always kept this in my nightstand right next to me for all these years. It represents to me the need to save money. You have to save money. Saving money, I've always told my children, is like freedom. It lessens your stress. And savings is really just deferred spending. You may or may not spend it later in life, but all you're doing is you're deferring the spending. I was so crazy about not being poor that I even went to college and got a degree in economics. And I remember when my father first heard about that, he thought, what in the world is economics? What are you talking about that you're going to go to college for that? And I said, well, it's about time and money. Really, that's what it comes down to, time and money. And obviously other things. But it was easy explanation from my father. And I remember him telling me, why don't you train to be a plumber? I mean, something that you could really make money at. I mean, what are you going to make money at being in economics? I said, well, that would be an economist. And I did want to be an economist. Once I graduated from Sac State, I worked for a company called Crocker Bank. And I wanted to be an economist, and I wanted to do projections. But I started, in the bank as a trainee manager. And I remember, I think I only had one suit at the time. This was right out of college. And my thinking was, which was bad thinking, is, well, it's a bank, so that's where all the money is. So I want to go into banking so I can make a lot of money. And once I got there, it was incredibly boring. It was probably the most boring thing, I have ever dealt with, the day-to-day savings, talking to everybody. And then the big thing was not making any money. They just don't pay you very much when you're in a bank. And I remember thinking, I could make more money in construction, so I decided to get back into construction where I didn't have to wear a suit. I remember they complained about me because they go, Dave, we're noticing that you have like maybe 2-3 suits that you're changing the tie and changing the shirt. Well, they didn't know I only had one suit actually, and I was pretty good at making it look different. But I kind of told them, I go, you're not paying me any money. I have no money to go buy a suit. And they said, well, you're going to have to save because it's becoming obvious that you're wearing the same suit every day. And so I decided to go back into construction where I could make twice as much as what I was making at a bank. And I could dress in shorts with my hiking boots and, a t-shirt. And back then I always wore tank tops. So I was like, this is like freedom. I can make a lot more money and I don't have to wear a suit. At first, when I wore a suit, it made me think that I was very special. And because I grew up in a blue-collar family, and nobody I knew wore suits. I didn't know anybody that even had a tie, except for maybe a funeral or something like that. And we always wore our ties, not the proper length, either too high or way too long, because we didn't even know how you were supposed to wear a tie. We always button all of our jackets all the way up rather than leaving the last button unbuttoned, And so it was kind of funny having to wear a suit and thinking that this thing about it being like I'm an executive, now. I don't work in the ditches, but yet I still wasn't making any money. It reminds me of another story when I worked at a milling plant where I was a Raymond mill operator, and I remember that they would grind this stuff down, and it was a union job. My prior job to it was a good job, pretty good. Actually, I was making more than my father, which irritated the crap out of him. But I remember them tasking me. I said, I'm going to quit because I'm going to get this other job. And they said, well, how much more do they pay you? I go, it's $1 an hour more. And they said, you're going to quit this job to go somewhere for $1 an hour more? And I said, yes, I am. And I said, and you're going to lose somebody because you don't want to pay an extra $1 an hour. Well, we can't afford it, blah, 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 blah. So I ended up going to this other job, and my whole life had always been looking at where could I go to make the most money? Because I only have so many hours in a day. So I want to maximize, what I made. When they said, what would you have told your younger self in this program? And the issue always seemed to be about money. It made me think about some of the things that I learned in economics and I kind of carry with me throughout my life. The first thing, there's really 3 items. You increase your income, which is what I was doing by getting $1 an hour more. You reduce your expenses, which goes along the lines of buying a house while you're young. Your price of your mortgage stays flat, where prices of rent go up and up. And then savings is really delayed spending. That's all it is. You're gonna spend it eventually, but you're holding it for right now. The more you can save and put aside, for that rainy day, the better off you're going to be. It actually equals freedom. In terms of increasing your income, that hourly thing was important for me. Obviously, I looked at, the health of the company I was going at, and I eventually ended up in sales. Sales, I found out while I was in economics, is the highest profession if you're, like, say, an employee and you're working for somebody. And it was interesting to me because why? Why is it so high? Well, it's because it's a skill that not everybody can do. Some people don't feel comfortable doing it. And then some people they just say, I can't sell. That's a very common thing. And so I really focused my whole life, motivational tapes and everything, to learn how to sell. And so in my channel, I'm going to talk about how I got into sales and what I've done in sales. The next thing I want to talk about was reduce your expenses. So if you can increase your income and reduce your expenses, the first thing you should try to do is to buy a house. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, don't buy a house. It's a big, paperweight. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything." But buying a house was probably one of the biggest things that I did in my life to make it so that I could be where I'm at now. I actually bought a couple of houses. My first house was in Sacramento, and I rented out the other rooms. It was like a 5-bedroom, so I had 4 roommates with me, and one of them is actually still a good friend of mine. And then my second house was a house that I bought with my wife. It was a pretty bad house. It was in Stockton, and so I remember it had a big fenced-in area for the entry, so that was my second one. My third house, and I did always take the money and transfer it into the next house, and so that helped me as a down payment. But my third house was a house that I built when I was in my 30s. It was always my dream to build my own house from the beginning. And so I was able to do that when I was in my 30s, and it meant a lot to me. It was a really big point of pride, to walk around in this house that I built. Now, obviously, I didn't build it like by myself, like building a cabin or something. I had other guys that were involved, but it did require to have a great knowledge of how construction works. And after I got my degree in economics, I went and took a lot of classes in construction, a lot of code enforcement type things, codes, so that I would understand it and prepare myself for it. And then I did buy houses and kind of fix them up and flip them, but I never built one from scratch, nor did I know anybody in my neighborhood where I grew up that had ever done that. So having your own house, it saves you from the increasing price of rent. Rent just keeps going up and up and up, and I do have some ideas on rent and how to keep your rent low, but buying a house is the ultimate. You have to do that. You typically do that when you're young, to buy a house when you're just getting ready to retire. That's not a good way to go. I had done a bunch of illustrations for MetLife for retirement planning. And so we had to put a lot of variables in there. How many assets you have, what is your Social Security going to be, what is your pension going to be, or money that you have saved. And almost all of them would never work out right unless you owned your house. Owning the house gives you a fixed cost of what the monthly amount is going out, because you still have to pay taxes on it, obviously property taxes, and you're going to have to carry insurance on it. That's pretty critical. The last thing I wanted to talk about with savings is really, you could think of it as delayed spending. It's not that you're not ever going to spend it, but you really have to think of savings as something that you're holding off on. But it doesn't make sense to say, I saved $300 this month, and maybe that's part of your food budget, so you end up spending $300 by the end of it. And what can happen is you get into this cycle where nothing is ever saved for more than a month or 2 months or 3 months, and you're really just kidding yourself. It's just a fool's game to do that. You need to put money into an account, and you need to be able to not touch it. So what I tell people is, if they ask me, I don't usually have a lot of people ask me, but if somebody asks me, I would recommend that you figure out what you could save. And so when I ask them that, they say, well, I could probably save, $100 per week, which is kind of excessive. If you haven't saved anything, how could you save $100 per week? I say, well, how about if you save $50 per month? Because it sounds like $100 per week, that would be $400. What do we say with $50 per month and you don't touch it? Oh my God, that's so easy. No, I could save probably $600 a month. I know that they're just playing this game in their mind because they haven't saved anything prior to seeing me. So, the reason that you want to save even $5 a week, it's not because you're saving the money, but you're creating a habit. If you can do that consistently, you will start. Don't worry about getting a big rate of return. You need to have about 6 months worth of savings, 6 months worth of your expenses, just to give you a breathing room, just to even begin to have a breathing. And I'm talking about not the money you're going to spend for food. I'm talking about just to give you some breathing room. So this is the beginning of what I would like to talk about, because I think it might help some people. And it's kind of what I've done with my life. I've been accused of having my first dollar that I ever made. And I'm not saying that I don't, but I'm just saying that it's nice to me to be known as, I'm not cheap by any standards. I like to enjoy myself. I like to go on good vacations, and I don't like to worry about money or argue about money. But it is nice to be known that way. And because I am, sometimes people will approach me and ask me questions. But sometimes, just like in that YouTube channel I was watching, what would you have told your younger self? You're kind of looking at stuff when it's way too late. Now, there's still things you can do, to start to create a nest egg, but it's always better to start it early. And I will show you in future videos how you can save. Thank you very much for coming by, and I really appreciate talking to you. And if you have any questions, I would like to answer them as best as I can. But give me a couple of videos in before you criticize anything on here. I've been told, or I saw in videos, that your first 10 videos are going to suck. And so I think this is number 3. So I still have 6 more before you can tell me how bad I suck. But I really want to build a community and people to really help them out. I can't lend you money, but I could lend you information, and hopefully that might at least put a better perspective on what you can do in the future. Thank you very much for finding me and stopping by. Subscribe so that we can create this community, and my future videos, I promise they will get better. Thank you much, and have a great day.